about 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they were a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.
Hello, and welcome to Candidates Upfront. This program allows voters to get the information directly from the candidates in the May 18th municipal primary election. It's a joint project of the League of Women Voters and Berks Community Television. Both are nonpartisan groups, meaning we never support or oppose a political candidate or a political party. And today, our featured race is Judge of the Court of Common Pleas. The Court of Common Pleas, which meets right here in Berks County, hears trial of major criminal and major civil matters. It hears matters involving children and families, and it hears appeals from the minor courts. The current salary is $186,665, and judges serve a 10-year term. Voters in each party, that means the Democrats will select and the Republicans will select, 2 of 5 candidates. The 5 candidates in alphabetical order are Tina Boyd, Osmer Deming, James Gavin, Kurt Geishauser, and Catherine Nadaroff. All will be asked the same questions in the same order and with the same general time limit. Now, each candidate's views are their own. They're not necessarily those of the League or BCTV. And today, our candidate is Tina Boyd. Welcome, Tina.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Please tell us, why have you decided to run for judge, and what education and background do you bring to the position?
I've been an attorney for 24 years, and my main focus has been on family law litigation. I was a Penn State graduate with a major in human development and family studies, and I moved to Dickinson School of Law to obtain my law degree. When I was finished with law school, I started my career clerking for Judge Elizabeth Ehrlich, who was head of the Family Court Division. And that's where my interest and compassion for representing families and children became about. Watching her go through the cases, watching how she made decisions, watching how she handled the litigants that appeared before her, and the just compassion and understanding that she had for these matters. And not only did my educational background allow me to make the decision to run for this particular very important position, but my upbringing as a child also has allowed me to believe that I can make a difference in this community as a judge. I was raised by my grandmother since I was 13 months old, and I, as a child, had a personal experience with the family court system where I had to decide who I wanted to live with, my mother or my grandmother. And that judge's decision impacted my life and why I'm here today, running for this position, and why I became an attorney.
Thank you. Is there a person, and you've already talked about the moment in your life, but what influenced you to run for judge?
Well, I believe I have a lot that I can bring to the Berks County bench as it relates to my experience in all areas of law. I've had the privilege in the last 24 years of practicing to work in every area of the court system, but my desire to work in family court has been a compassion and something that I've chosen because of my background. My mentors have obviously been my grandmother, Judge Ehrlich, and John Hoffert and Terry Weiler, who were the first attorneys that I worked for when I went into private practice.
And who is your favorite Supreme Court justice? That can be past or present, and please tell us why.
Okay. So I've always been a fan of Chief Justice Roberts. He was appointed by Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan is one of my favorite presidents. So I believe Chief Justice Roberts has, he has a moderate to conservative view, more on the conservative side, and I believe that, his opinions and his decisions on cases are very well thought out, and he explains his position very well.
If you were talking to someone with no legal or political background, how would you explain the difference between what is called a conservative judge and a liberal judge?
Well, I think a conservative judge is a judge that follows the Constitution as it was intended and written, that there's really no room for movement or, your own personal beliefs or any interpretation issues. I mean, I think it's written, you follow it as it's written, as the drafters wanted it to be followed. And I think a liberal position is more someone who wants to evolve and move in a different direction or expand upon what the Constitution had provided. So you would probably consider those people more of an evolutionist theory as opposed to a conservative theory.
And under what circumstances would you recuse yourself from a case?
Well, I think anytime you have a litigant or a party or even an attorney or a witness or someone that's appearing before you who you either have a personal relationship with, you had either, had some dealings with that you believe would taint your decision in how you would roll in the case based on that person's appearance in your courtroom, I think you have the obligation to recuse yourself. Also, if you have a personal belief about an issue that's being presented before you, I think you would have to do that as well. Now, I want to elaborate a little bit. As judges, we take oaths that we will basically not allow our personal preferences or opinions to dissuade or have any impact on our decisions that are made. But I think we're all human beings, and sometimes that just can't be helped. And if that were the case, the judge absolutely has to recuse themselves so that it is an impartial setting and everybody's having a fair trial and a fair, bite at justice.
Let's say you're calling people for jury duty. How do you explain to citizens the duties they have on a jury and why it's important that they serve, the need to serve?
Well, jury selection and jury trials are, the staple of our legal system. It allows your peers in the community to hear the facts and make determinations. And rather than, one person making a ruling on what they perceive to be right or wrong or an opinion, you have 12 members of your peers who hear the facts, and they're lay people. They have really very limited knowledge as to the legal system or the laws. They're basing what they're hearing on the evidence that's being presented and from the jury instructions and so forth that the judge is providing to them before they make a decision. It's very important for us to keep impartiality and fairness in our legal system and justice for jurors to take their obligations seriously and to, have the opportunity to sit and decide these types of matters. Plus, I think it's kind of an interesting thing for jurors to come who may not have otherwise be, in the legal system to kind of see what happens in a courtroom. Because I think I always hear when people say, oh, I had jury duty. It was really exciting. I had this case, and they want to talk about it because to them it's foreign. To us, it's every day. To lawyers, we do this every day.
What is the appropriate role for a common pleas judge if an end-of-life dispute is brought to the court by family members?
Well, I think that's a hard question as to what an appropriate role is. I mean, I think as to any issue that's dealing with family matters, a judge has to come forth with compassion and understanding for the family's difficult decision, for the emotional state that the family's in. This is a loss of a loved one, and Although it may be an easy decision for those of us who are objective, for the people that are enduring the loss, it's a very hard situation. So, I think a judge needs to have the compassion to understand what the family's going through, and then look at, is there a living will? Was there, a document that allowed the judge to determine what was the intention of the person? What did they want? Did they want to have their family members make this decision, or had they made the decision and are asking that their decision be, abided by, and that the judge not allow the family to make that decision? So I think the biggest thing is compassion, and then looking at the intentions of the ill person.
In sentencing convicted criminals, what factors should be considered? When is an alternate to jail appropriate?
Well, anytime you're looking at, factors and alternatives to jail situation and incarceration, I think the most important thing that you want to look at is, what is the history and the background of the individual? Is this a first-time offender? Is this an offender with multiple, offenses and a record? And what is the chance of rehabilitating this individual? Is there a problem with this individual that they continue to disobey the law? Do they have some type of mental health issue, drug addiction, or are they just bad people? I mean, there are people in this world that are just not good people that should not be on the streets. And there are people that would normally, be good individuals if they had help that they needed. So I think you have to look at the big picture when making those determinations as a judge.
Please give us your views on plea bargaining.
Well, I think plea bargaining has its place, as every, situation in a court setting. I think plea bargaining saves a lot of the taxpayers' dollars with long, lengthy trials that ultimately may end up very close to what the plea would have been had the trial not been conducted. So I think based on the circumstances, again, you have to look at the offense that's being committed and whether or not it makes sense to, have a plea bargain in place. And I think as the judge, that's not our determination to make. Obviously, the district attorney and the defense attorneys, usually deal with whether or not they're going to offer a plea and whether that plea is going to be accepted. I think as a judge, you just have to make sure that whoever is accepting the plea has understood their rights, they understand what they're entering into, and they understand that they're basically waiving their right to a trial by their peers.
If you are elected, what area would you prefer to serve in? The criminal court, civil court, family court, or other special court? And please tell us why. You've kind of covered this before.
Yeah,
but we'll
I did cover this before. This is kind of like my topic here. I obviously would love and be humbled to sit in family court in this county. I've been an attorney, as I indicated, for 24 years. I have a plethora of experience in the family court sector in terms of the laws, different types of litigants, creative methods for resolving the cases, and just like my background with human development and family studies from Penn State. Body language and people's personalities and the way, just kind of seeing how people react, that's a big part of what we do in family court and making decisions and figuring out the credibility of people. I would, believe that I could bring, a very big, how do I want to say this, a very good opportunity for Berks County residents to have me sitting on the bench. I bring a lot of knowledge, both personally and professionally, and I think I would be a big asset to the Berks County bench.
Why is the position of judge so important that people should come out and vote?
Well, people don't realize, but judges at the Court of Common Pleas level, we're the trial courts, and what that basically means is we're kind of the decision makers for where the case goes. Either it concludes at this level or it goes up to a further level, whether it be the superior or Supreme Court. trial court judges and court of common pleas judges, we see people from all walks of life. We deal with all kinds of situations depending on what court you're in. You can deal with landlord-tenant matters, land use issues, estate matters. You can deal with family matters, criminal matters, litigation, personal injury. And I think these are areas that affect everyday citizens and everyday people. So, you can't complain about a decision that a judge makes if you're not voting and, participating in that decision-making process, because these are the judges that affect your lives in the event that you would be appearing before them at some point in your lifetime.
As a member of the judiciary, what can you do, either on or off the bench, to ensure that all Pennsylvanians have access to justice?
Well, I think you should, educate yourself as a judge as to what opportunities and services are available in the public to unrepresented or indigent parties and litigants. We do have Mid-Penn legal services available. We have Safe Berks, who does help individuals in domestic violence situations, and we have the lawyer referral service, and we also have the service that allows for a deduction when people have a lower income, and the name is escaping me right now, but it's through the Bar Association. And I think as a judge, you need to educate yourself as to those opportunities for litigants, and then not only that, but you need to direct them in the correct avenues if they, in fact, want an attorney in your courtroom.
Alternatives to incarceration not only cost less, but often result in less recidivism. What is your view on alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenders?
I'm 100% in support of alternative methods. Our treatment courts in our county have been phenomenal with assisting people who have drug issues and other issues that are creating some barrier to them being good, upstanding citizens in our county. And I hear very good things about our treatment court. I've had some of my own clients who have participated in the treatment courts, and I think they're a great alternative to incarceration. I mean, incarceration, the only thing that it does is basically punish someone, but it doesn't always solve the problem. I think as a judge, if you can solve the problem and keep the person out of the court system, you're benefiting the taxpayers and benefiting the community as a whole.
How would you deal with difficult cases, especially those that are highly publicized?
Well, I think you would limit the amount of people that would be permitted into your courtroom. And, it would be, as the judge, you would very much have to instruct the jury that they are not to have any conversations or, looking at any type of social media or newspapers or educating themselves at all on what is happening with that particular case. And then I think you also need to, like I indicated, maintain decorum in the courtroom by not allowing people that have really no position being in the courtroom to be there, because that's going to could cause a lot more controversy and possibly could, affect the trial and how it's being run, or how, the juror is portraying the facts and the evidence that's being presented.
Juveniles may face mandatory criminal charges. How can we protect our schools and our communities, and at the same time not irrevocably hurt the juvenile who makes a mistake?
Well, I think that's a tough question, because obviously as judges we can't really control what's happening in the school systems or in the community, but what we can do is, very similar to what we would do with nonviolent offenders is, provide treatment to the juvenile delinquents. And I think providing education and encouraging our society to get into the schools, such as our district attorneys, to do presentations, and the public defenders to do presentations within the court in the schooling system to allow people to see what really happens when you don't follow the law. And I don't want to say it as a scare tactic, but kind of as a scare tactic to, discourage our youth from getting into trouble. But I think really as a judge, the main thing you want to do for a juvenile is to get them into any type of alternative treatment that you can to hopefully get them on the right path before they turn 18.
We've talked a little bit about the special courts for those crimes connected to illness, such as drug court and veterans court. Would you consider additional special courts, and if so, for what groups?
Well, I think what I would like to see is, I think there's a lot of mental illness in our community and in our state and country as a whole. And I think that has even been, worsened since the pandemic with people being in their home and being secluded from the society. I would like to see more treatment for mental health individuals. Not only does that affect a lot of the family court system with people in the custody cases, but it also affects people who commit crimes if they have schizophrenia or depression, or they want to hurt other people. I think we can get people on the right track by getting them into some type of treatment for the mental health, which a lot of times is also self-medicated by drug addiction and alcohol. So I think you could do a dole type of court system with the drug, the treatment courts, as well as the mental health assistance.
Medical marijuana is lawful in Pennsylvania, and yet active ingredients in marijuana remain on a federally controlled substance. Do you support measures to make federal law more consistent with state laws? And what's your approach to this inconsistency in our laws?
Well, I have to be honest, I'm not very educated on medical marijuana and the laws and, the federal versus the states. I mean, I understand the difference between a federal law and a state law, and I think that a lot of the states are doing different things that are contradictory to what the federal law, how they view certain things. I would have to educate myself a little bit more on this issue to provide an educated response to this, but obviously, I think the states need to get a little more in line with the federal or vice versa, because I think you're seeing a lot of inconsistency, which is really hard as, a litigant as well as a judge on deciding these types of issues when they are presented before you.
In Pennsylvania, judges run as a member of a political party. What is the significance of party affiliation for judgeships?
At the trial court level, I believe there is little to no significance for partisan type running in terms of party line affiliation. As a judge at the trial court level, we would rarely, if ever, see constitutional issues that would be presented before us. Your Superior and Supreme Court judges, they run on party line affiliation because they do make constitutional decisions that affect people, and their personal views do affect how they decide on certain cases. At the trial court, we rarely would have these issues being presented before us, and that's why as Court of Common Pleas candidates were permitted to cross-file, and we cross-file as a Democrat and also as a Republican. So, I think it's a tough thing until they change the cross-filing for the argument to be made that party line affiliation is significant in this type of election.
Thank you. We're going to go to 45 seconds for the next few questions,
Okay.
just because we're a little tight on our time. How would you feel about nonpartisan selection of judges, and what would your thoughts be on merit selection of judges?
Well, I always tell people that I think when you are making a decision for any type of election or any type of candidacy, you have to look at the candidate as a whole. What does the candidate represent? What does the candidate bring to the table that can, be an effective asset for this type of position that they're running for? And I think once you determine that, I think that's, in my opinion, more crucial than deciding what party line they are. I know that party line affiliation has its place, and I don't want to undermine that, but I'm just saying for this type of position, it doesn't.
Past judicial campaigns have been noted for high spending. Please explain your views on money in judicial politics.
Well, this is a pretty big county. We extend from Hereford to Bethel, and my position is if you're running in a countywide campaign, you need to get to all of your voters and allow people to know what you represent and what you're bringing to the table. I think it's a very subjective type of issue. It depends on how much a candidate is able to spend and what the candidate needs to do to get their name out to the voters. So I think it's more subjective than something that, would be across the board to every candidate.
Okay, we're going to take about 30 seconds for the next one to
Okay.
give you time for a closing statement. Tell us about any community or volunteer work you're involved in.
I served on the board of Safe Berks as well as CASA in the past. I have provided support to different organizations such as Opportunity House, Olivet Boys and Girls, the Animal Rescue League, and I also am very actively involved with my children's school, the Ole Valley Youth League, and their activities within their school district.
Thank you. And that should give us 1 minute for a closing
Okay.
statement.
So I'm asking for your support in this election on May 18th. I am an attorney with 24 years of experience. I bring professional and personal experience to the bench. I can make a difference in this county for those experiences and for what I can bring to the table. I want every litigant who would appear before me to know that their case is important, that I care what happens, and that my decisions will impact their lives, and that I understand that, and that's why I will do the best job I can as a judge to make the right decisions for the right reasons. I'm asking for your support. I want to bring what I've learned throughout my life and throughout my career to Berks County, and I want to dedicate the rest of my legal career to serving this community, the families and the children of this county. And I thank you for your vote. I thank you for listening today, and I thank the League of Women Voters for this candidate upfront forum.
Thank you. So we thank Tina Boyd. She is a candidate for Judge of the Court of Common Pleas, and she's just discussed her qualifications and her philosophy. Viewers, please remember the municipal primary election is May 18th. The last day you can register would be May 3rd. So you want to be registered by May 3rd. And to check your status, you can go to votespa.com. To check for other races, you can go to votes411.org. And please continue to watch BCTV for more information on the candidates and on the constitutional amendments on your ballot. For the League of Women Voters, I'm Judith Cranis. Good day.
We make about 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they were a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.